The phone buzzed before the sun came up, screen flashing like a heartbeat in the dark. Hundreds of missed calls, messages stacked one over another. Confusion, anger, guilt. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what I'd finally done. I'd cut them off, all of them. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. You'd be surprised how quickly love turns into entitlement when the money stops. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking, each second heavier than the last. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I was free, and I had no idea how far they'd go to punish me for it. It was 7:15 a.m. when the first vibration shook the nightstand. Then another, then another. My phone lit up like a small storm, hundreds of missed calls and messages spilling across the screen. Every name was familiar. My son, his wife, my daughter, all wanting to know why their cards had suddenly stopped working. I sat there in the quiet, holding the phone without opening a single message. The morning light was soft, slipping through the blinds, but it felt harsh against my chest. My hands weren't trembling. They should have been. Instead, there was this stillness inside me, the kind that comes after a decision that's already been made. Last night, I'd logged into my accounts and closed every shared payment, every automatic transfer, every quiet little drain I'd been too afraid to stop before. It wasn't an impulsive act. It wasn't revenge. It was the only way left to save what was left of me. For years, I'd told myself that giving was love, that taking care of them, paying for their bills, their cars, their lives, was what a mother does. But somewhere along the way, love had become currency, and I had become the bank. Now, as the phone buzzed again, I let it ring. I felt the ache of guilt pressing at the edges of my resolve, but underneath it, something steadier was taking root. Peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to earn the love you've already given freely. I didn't know what they'd say next, or how far they'd go to make me feel small again. But I did know this wasn't the first time they used me, and this time, I wasn't going back. It didn't start this way. There was a time when giving felt like love, and love was all I thought I had left. After my husband, Robert, passed away, the house in Dayton felt too big, too quiet. The sound of his chair creaking when he read the paper, the way he whistled off key while making coffee. Those small things used to fill the rooms. When they were gone, I looked for noise anywhere I could find it, and the only place that made sense was my family. Michael was my only child. He'd grown into a man with a good job, a wife named Jessica, and two little ones who reminded me of the days when life had purpose. I told myself that helping them was my way of staying useful, a way to still feel part of something. It started small: groceries, gas money, a surprise check when they needed a new washer. Jessica always sounded grateful. Michael said I was a lifesaver, and for a while, I believed that. When you've spent your life taking care of others, as a school secretary, a mother, a wife, it becomes part of who you are. I used to balance ledgers, plan field trips, make sure everyone else was okay before thinking about myself. That habit didn't stop when I retired. It just shifted. My bank account became the way I showed love. I never thought of it as sacrifice. It felt natural, paying for their house down payment, sending extra when the kids got sick, covering bills when money was tight. Every time I helped, I felt a little less alone. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's dependency dressed up as devotion. I told myself I was helping my son build his life, but the truth was, I was terrified of being forgotten. I thought giving meant they'd keep me close. I thought generosity would keep us connected. But love without limits has a price, and mine was coming due. At first, helping felt good. It gave me purpose, something steady to hold on to after Robert was gone. Every time Michael or Jessica needed something, I told myself it meant they still needed me. Maybe not in the same way as when he was little, but still, in some way. It started small, picking up the kids from school so Jessica could work late, dropping off casseroles when they were too tired to cook, slipping a few extra dollars into Michael's account when their mortgage payment came due early. They'd say thank you, and I'd feel that familiar warmth in my chest, the one that told me I mattered. But slowly, thank you became assumption. A call would come, not asking, but telling. The kids can stay over this weekend. We'll need help with the bills again. No warmth in their voices, just expectation. I started saying yes before they even finished the sentence. It was easier than feeling guilty. Somewhere along the line, I stopped being part of their lives and became part of their routine. Babysitter, loan provider, safety net. The kids would run straight to the tablet when they came over. Michael would scroll through his phone. Jessica would talk about how tired she was, how hard things had been lately, and I'd nod, sitting there, invisible in the house I helped them buy. I told myself this was what love looked like. Quiet, selfless, unconditional. But late at night, when I'd wash their dishes and turn off the lights after they left, something in me began to ache. Not from the work, but from the silence that followed. The line between love and obligation had blurred so slowly, I almost didn't see it happen. I wasn't angry yet, just tired. I was the one paying for dinner, but somehow, I wasn't part of the family anymore. I woke up that morning feeling lighter than I had in months. My grandson was graduating high school, the first in our family to do it with honors. I ironed my floral dress. The same one Robert used to say brought out my smile, and wrapped a small envelope with some cash inside. It wasn't much, but it was what I could give. Love, after all, was supposed to be about showing up. The ceremony was held in the school gym, packed with proud parents and flashing cameras. When I spotted Michael and Jessica across the rows, I waved. Jessica smiled politely, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I told myself they were just distracted. I took my seat a few rows behind them, close enough to see, but far enough to not be in the way. Afterward, we all gathered at a restaurant Michael had picked. It was loud and bright, filled with laughter that didn't seem to include me. I offered to pay for the meal. It had always been my way, but Jessica insisted she'd already taken care of it. The tone in her voice made it clear I wasn't part of the decision. When the check came, I realized my name wasn't on the reservation. There wasn't even a chair for me at their table, just an empty spot near the end, next to strangers from Jessica's side of the family. Someone joked that I could squeeze in if I really wanted, and everyone laughed lightly before turning back to their conversations. I tried to laugh too, but it caught in my throat. So I sat there, smiling when the camera turned my way, clapping when my grandson opened his gifts. No one noticed that I didn't eat. The envelope I'd brought stayed in my purse. My son didn't meet my eyes once. When it was over, I slipped out quietly before dessert, saying I had to get home before dark. No one stopped me. The parking lot was full of noise, car doors slamming, kids laughing, the smell of summer heat on pavement. But inside my car, it was silent. I watched families hugging and taking pictures through the windshield, and something inside me broke. Not loudly, but in a soft, final way. On the drive home, the streetlights flickered on one by one. I kept thinking about that empty chair, that polite smile, that quiet exclusion dressed up as kindness. And for the first time, a question I'd never dared to ask settled in my chest. If I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice? The morning after the graduation felt heavier than any I could remember. The house was quiet, still holding the echo of a life that no longer fit me. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, watching the sunlight crawl across the linoleum floor. The ache in my chest was steady, not sharp anymore, just there, like a bruise that had settled deep. I replayed the night in my head, the laughter that didn't include me, the chair that wasn't mine, the silence when I left. Something inside me had shifted, not broken, changed. I realized I couldn't keep loving people who only saw me as useful. I couldn't keep mistaking guilt for love. So I opened my laptop. My hands didn't shake this time. One by one, I went through the accounts, the monthly transfers, the credit cards with their names, the automatic payments I'd set up years ago without a second thought. I stopped them all, not out of spite, not out of anger, but because peace costs something too, and I had finally decided it was worth paying for. I gathered every document, the will, the insurance papers, the small savings account I'd ignored for years, and laid them neatly in a folder. I changed passwords, made new copies, wrote down what mattered. Each click felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd given away. When it was done, I sat back and exhaled. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The weight I'd carried for so long wasn't there anymore. Just a quiet stillness, almost gentle. I knew they'd call. I knew there'd be anger, confusion, maybe even threats. But as the clock hit 2:30 p.m. and the sunlight stretched across the kitchen, I realized something simple and true. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not guilt. Peace. The silence didn't last long. By the next morning, my phone lit up with messages. First confusion, then anger, then something colder. Michael's name flashed again and again. Jessica's too. Each voicemail sounded like a performance disbelief. Guilt tripping. A hint of outrage wrapped in fake concern. They called it a misunderstanding. They said I must be confused. That stress was getting to me. But underneath every word was panic. The kind that only comes when money stops flowing. When I didn't answer, the tone shifted. Texts turned sharp. Demands replaced questions. Then came the final blow, a letter from a lawyer claiming they were seeking legal guardianship. They said I was no longer of sound mind to handle my own affairs. My own son, the boy I'd fed, clothed, defended, now painting me as unstable for daring to say no. For a few minutes, I couldn't move. The paper trembled in my hands, but not from fear, from something deeper, sadness, maybe, or recognition. This was what love without respect turned into when it lost control. That afternoon, I heard a knock. It was Eleanor Brooks, my neighbor from across the street, a retired paralegal with kind eyes and a sharper mind than anyone gave her credit for. She'd noticed the mailman dropping off certified envelopes and came to check in. When I showed her the letter, she didn't flinch. She told me exactly what to do. Keep records, gather documents, print statements, every transaction, every transfer, every message. For the next week, we sat at my dining table sorting papers into neat stacks. She taught me what evidence looked like. And somewhere between the spreadsheets and the silence, I found my footing again. They wanted to prove I'd lost my mind, but all I'd lost was my patience. By the time the next letter came, I was ready. My voice didn't shake when I called the lawyer. My hands didn't tremble when I signed the response. I was done being the quiet one, the forgiving one, the giver who never stopped giving. This time, I wasn't defending my money. I was defending my dignity. And I wasn't alone anymore. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that hums under fluorescent lights. I sat at the long table, papers neatly stacked before me, while across the room, Michael and Jessica whispered to their attorney. My heart didn't race this time. I'd already lived through the worst. The humiliation, the betrayal, the disbelief. What was left now was truth. And truth doesn't tremble. The judge asked a few questions, and the lawyers exchanged the kind of polite words that carry sharp edges. I watched Jessica avoid my eyes, her hands folded too neatly in her lap. Eleanor sat beside me, calm and steady. She had spent weeks combing through my records, catching every inconsistency, every missing dollar. When the other side claimed I was confused about my finances, Eleanor simply opened the folder we'd prepared. She presented bank statements, transfers I hadn't authorized, checks with my name written in a handwriting that wasn't mine. Then came the emails, the forged forms sent from Jessica's account, disguised as mine. The room changed. You could feel it. The attorney's tone softened. The judge leaned forward. Michael's face turned pale. When the truth finally landed, it didn't need drama. No shouting, no tears, just quiet realization. Jessica's story fell apart in slow motion. I saw her trying to explain, her voice tightening as Michael's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. He looked at me, and for the first time, he saw me. Not as his safety net, not as his problem to manage, but as the mother he'd lost long before this day. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Justice had its own kind of silence. Clean, heavy, final. When it was over, I gathered my papers and stood. Eleanor smiled faintly, her hand brushing mine in quiet victory. As I walked out into the late afternoon light, I felt the weight that had sat on my chest for years begin to lift. The truth had done what love could not. It set me free. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just clear, just done. And for the first time in a long while, I was ready to live my life. Not for them, but for me. It's been a few weeks now. The house feels different, not emptier, just quieter in a way that finally feels right. I wake up without dread. The mornings belong to me again. I drink my coffee by the window, watch the sun rise over the trees, and think about how peace doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, filling the spaces that used to ache. I've learned more in these past months than I did in years of giving. I used to think love meant saying yes. That sacrifice proved devotion. But real love, I've learned, has boundaries. It's not about how much you give, but how much of yourself you protect while giving. When I finally stopped letting guilt make my choices, I found something I hadn't felt in years: respect for myself. I don't hate Michael or Jessica. I've let that go. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. It just means I refuse to carry the weight any longer. I still miss the idea of family, the laughter, the warmth. But I've built a new kind of peace in its place. It's quiet, but it's mine. If you're listening and something in my story feels familiar, I hope you know this. Sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing others, and that's okay. Saying no doesn't make you cruel. Walking away doesn't make you cold. It just means you've decided to live with dignity, not depletion. Thank you for hearing my story. If you've ever stood at that same crossroads, between guilt and freedom, between love and self-respect, I hope you'll share it. Maybe your words will help someone else find their peace too.